They told me the HOA fine was final. $30,000 for a cabin they claimed was on their property. But when I started asking questions, I uncovered something no one in the neighborhood wanted to talk about. Something hidden in the property maps, buried in old court files, and whispered about by the few brave enough to speak. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized this was never about a fine at all. It was about control, secrets, and a piece of land someone was willing to destroy lives over. But tell me, what would you do if you discovered the HOA didn't just want your cabin? They wanted you gone. They said it would be a fair competition. They lied. From the moment the 5 women stepped into the Blackwood mansion, the air shifted. Their perfume lingered in the marble hallway like invisible smoke, thick enough to choke out anyone who didn't belong. Victoria Ashworth, draped in diamonds, was the first to speak. "Well," she said, glancing around at the towering crystal chandeliers, "at least he has taste." The man she was talking about, David Blackwood, stood at the far end of the room, his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, holding tightly to his hand. Emma's brown eyes scanned the women nervously, as if she already knew something they didn't, that only one of them would be chosen to be her new mother. What none of them realized was that Emma's choice would change all of their lives. Forever. The rules were simple. The women would stay in the mansion for a month. They would live with David and Emma, share meals, spend time together, and, most importantly, bond with the little girl. At the end of the month, Emma would decide who would become her stepmother. Simple, except it wasn't. Because in the far corner of the room, quietly wiping down the marble railing, was Kesha Williams. 28 years old, wearing a plain black cleaning uniform, her hair pulled back into a bun. She wasn't part of the contest. She wasn't even supposed to be noticed. But Emma's gaze kept drifting toward her, and that didn't go unnoticed. The first test of the day came at lunch. A long dining table, silver platters of roasted chicken, crystal glasses filled with sparkling cider. The women laughed loudly, their conversations dripping with rehearsed charm. Then, crash! One of the women, Olivia, accidentally knocked over a tall crystal vase. Shards exploded across the marble floor. Kesha was there in seconds, kneeling silently to clean up the mess. That's when Victoria leaned toward the others and whispered, "That woman shouldn't even be in the same room as us." The words were soft, but sharp enough to cut skin. Emma heard them, so did David. And somewhere, deep inside the mansion's walls, the hidden microphones caught every word. 2 hours later, as the women toured the mansion, David stood in his office, watching the security monitors. He saw Kesha in the kitchen, quietly preparing Emma's favorite snack, peanut butter toast cut into heart shapes. He also saw the women in the guest lounge, sipping wine and laughing. Why are those women being mean to Kesha? Emma had asked him that morning, her small voice breaking through the office door. It was a question he couldn't shake. That night, as Emma fell asleep clutching the stuffed rabbit Kesha had mended for her, David sat in his study, staring at the flickering security feed. He watched the women talking in low voices, their smiles gone. He couldn't hear everything they said from that angle, but what he caught chilled him. That girl needs to learn about social hierarchy early on. Priscilla Montgomery, the lawyer, said coldly. It's important she understands who the appropriate people are for her class. And then came Victoria's smirk. She'll learn. We'll make sure of it. David's jaw tightened. He thought this contest would help Emma heal. But now, a darker question was forming in his mind. What happens when the people you trust to protect your child are the very ones hurting her? The night was just beginning, and so was the game. The next morning, the mansion felt colder. Emma had woken before sunrise, tiptoeing downstairs in her fuzzy slippers. She found Kesha in the kitchen, humming softly while mixing pancake batter. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla filled the air. "Morning sunshine," Kesha said, smiling. "You hungry?" Emma nodded, but her smile faded quickly. "They don't like you," she whispered, glancing toward the hallway. Kesha froze for just a second, then continued whisking. "Don't worry about them," she said gently. "Some people just don't understand yet. Yet, the word lingered in Emma's mind like a secret code. By breakfast time, the 5 candidates had taken their seats at the long dining table, each dressed like they were attending a magazine photo shoot rather than a family meal. They smiled sweetly at David, but the moment Kesha walked in with the food, the air thickened. "Is this all we're having?" Olivia muttered under her breath, eyeing the pancakes. Victoria gave a polite laugh. "I suppose not everyone's palate is refined." Emma's tiny fists clenched in her lap. David, sitting at the head of the table, noticed but said nothing. Instead, he watched, observed, collected evidence. Because if there was one thing David Blackwood knew as a businessman, it was that the truth always revealed itself, if you were patient enough. Later that afternoon, the women decided to spend time with Emma in the sunroom. Kesha was dusting the bookshelves nearby, pretending not to listen. "So, Emma," Priscilla began, crossing her legs in that deliberate way lawyers do when they're about to trap someone in a conversation. "Do you like living here?" "Yes," Emma replied. "And who do you like spending time with the most?" Victoria pressed, her eyes narrowing. Emma hesitated. She glanced at Kesha. "Kesha." Silence. Then the laughter came, low, cruel, and calculated. "She's just the cleaning lady." "Sweetie?" Victoria said, tilting her head like she was explaining the rules of the world to a child. "She's not family." Emma's cheeks turned red. She looked down at her lap. David watched the entire exchange from his office via the hidden cameras. His stomach churned. This wasn't harmless teasing. It was something uglier. Something that could break a child's spirit. But what disturbed him even more was Kesha's reaction. She didn't defend herself. She didn't speak up. She just kept dusting, eyes steady, jaw set, like she'd been through this before. Why wasn't she fighting back? That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, David found Kesha in the laundry room, folding freshly washed linens. "I heard what happened earlier," he said. Kesha didn't look up. "Kids notice everything. I can't stop them from hearing things they shouldn't." "But you didn't say anything." Kesha finally met his gaze. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Sometimes, Mr. Blackwood, the best way to deal with poison is to let the person drinking it believe it's wine." Her words stayed with him long after she left the room. That night, David replayed the security footage again and again. He saw the women's smiles vanish whenever they thought they were off camera. He saw the little gestures, the exchanged glances, the whispered comments that hinted at a growing alliance against Kesha. But why? She wasn't even in the competition. What did they think they were protecting? And then another question hit him. One he couldn't shake. What if Kesha was keeping secrets of her own? The next morning, as the women gathered for brunch, David received an unexpected phone call. He stepped into his office, closing the door behind him. The voice on the other end was quiet but urgent. "Mr. Blackwood, there's something you need to know about one of the people living in your house right now." David's grip on the phone tightened. "Who?" There was a pause. Then, "The one you're not watching closely enough." The line went dead. David stood frozen, staring at the black screen of his phone. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if the real threat was the women competing for his daughter's heart, or the one woman who wasn't competing at all. By the end of the first week, the mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a battlefield. The 5 women moved like a pack, each one perfectly polite when David was in the room. But as soon as he left, their smiles turned sharp. They didn't attack Kesha directly. Their cruelty was more refined than that. It was in the way they accidentally left muddy shoe prints on the floor she'd just cleaned. The way they'd call her from across the house just to hand them something sitting within arm's reach. And always the comments. "You know, Emma," Olivia said one afternoon, leaning casually against the doorway of the playroom, "a real mother can take you to Paris. Can Kesha do that?" "She's too busy scrubbing toilets," Victoria added with a smirk. Emma's face tightened. She turned away, pretending to be absorbed in her coloring book. Kesha said nothing, but David, watching from his office, saw her hand pause for a fraction of a second before she continued folding Emma's laundry. Why was she taking this? Why wasn't she defending herself? The truth was, Kesha had faced worse. The insults rolled off her like rain on steel. But what she wouldn't admit, even to herself, was how much it hurt to see Emma caught in the crossfire. One night, after dinner, David was reviewing his company's quarterly report when he noticed the red light on his security system flashing. It meant a recording had been automatically saved due to unusual audio activity. Curious, he played it back. It was from the dining room earlier that day. The recording began with polite chatter, until the sound of glass clinking shut it down. Then came Priscilla's voice, low but venomous. "That girl is going to be impossible to control if she keeps looking up to her. She needs to understand the difference between the help and the family." Victoria agreed. "If David won't teach her, we will." Then Olivia laughed. "I've already started. I told her Kesha once stole from a family she worked for." David sat back in his chair, blood turning cold. The accusation was a lie. He'd done a background check on Kesha before hiring her. Her record was spotless. So why invent something like that? And what would it do to Emma if she believed it? The next day, David decided to test something. He asked Kesha to join them for lunch, not to serve, but to sit at the table as a guest. The women's reaction was almost imperceptible, but he caught it. The flicker of annoyance in Victoria's eyes, the tightening of Olivia's jaw. Throughout the meal, they tried to bait her. Little jabs disguised as jokes. "Oh, Kesha," Victoria said sweetly. "I suppose you're not used to eating food like this, are you?" Kesha smiled politely. "Food is food, Miss Ashworth. It's the company that makes it special." Emma grinned. David almost smiled too. But then he noticed something strange. Kesha's eyes weren't on the women. They were scanning the far corner of the dining room, where the old grandfather clock stood. And for just a moment, he thought he saw something flicker in her expression. Something like fear. That night, when the house was quiet, David went to the dining room. He examined the clock. Nothing unusual, at least nothing obvious. But the feeling lingered, like there was something in that room he wasn't seeing. He started wondering, was Kesha simply enduring the women's cruelty out of strength? Or was she staying quiet for another reason entirely? And then there was that phone call. The one you're not watching closely enough. Could they have been talking about her? The next morning, Emma burst into his office, tears streaming down her face. "They told me Kesha's going to leave," she sobbed. David felt his stomach drop. "Who told you that?" Emma hiccuped. "All of them. They said you're going to send her away because she's not good enough for us." David clenched his fists. The line between competition and cruelty had been crossed. But if Kesha was truly innocent, why did she seem to be hiding something? And more importantly, what would happen to Emma if the truth came out too late? By week 2, the mansion had settled into an uneasy rhythm. The women continued their subtle attacks. Emma clung tighter to Kesha, and David kept watching. But now he wasn't just watching for cruelty. He was watching for clues. It started with a delivery. A small, plain package addressed to Kesha arrived one morning. She was dusting the staircase when the butler handed it to her. For a moment, her face went pale. She slipped it into her cleaning cart without opening it. David noticed. Hours later, when she thought no one was around, Kesha disappeared into the laundry room. David, curious, checked the nearest security feed. There she was, sitting on a stool, the package in her lap. She tore the brown paper slowly, carefully. Inside was a single envelope. She read whatever was inside, and then, without hesitation, she fed the paper into the laundry room's small trash burner. Why destroy it? That evening, during dinner, Victoria launched a new attack. "Emma, dear," she said sweetly, "when your father marries one of us, we'll take you shopping in New York. You'll get to wear real designer clothes, not hand-me-downs." Emma didn't answer. She just looked at Kesha, who was quietly clearing plates. But David saw the flicker of hurt in the girl's eyes. Later that night, he found Emma in her room, sitting on the bed with her arms wrapped around her knees. "Daddy," she whispered, "what if Kesha really has to leave? What if she's in trouble?" The words hit David like a punch. "Why would you say that?" Emma hesitated. "I saw her crying in the laundry room. She didn't see me. She was holding a letter, and then she burned it. So Emma had seen it too. That night, long after the house went quiet, David searched Kesha's public records again. Everything looked clean, too clean. No debts, no criminal history, no lawsuits. It was as if she'd been careful to leave no footprints at all. But why would someone erase their past? The next morning, Kesha avoided David's gaze entirely. Instead, she focused on Emma, helping her with homework, making her laugh. But even in those moments, David saw it, something flickering behind her eyes. That afternoon, as the women lounged in the garden sipping champagne, Kesha stayed inside, polishing the silverware. That's when David decided to test her again. He stepped into the kitchen, leaning casually against the counter. "Kesha," he said, "if you had the chance to leave here, would you?" She looked up, startled. "Why would I leave? It's just a question." Kesha's eyes softened, but there was a guardedness there. "Sometimes, Mr. Blackwood, leaving isn't a choice people make. Sometimes, it's a choice that's made for them." The words stayed with him all afternoon. That evening, when David checked the day's security footage, he saw something that made his blood run cold. One of the women, Olivia, was in the laundry room, rummaging through Kesha's cleaning cart. She found the ash-filled burner, poked through it, and pulled out a small scrap of paper the fire hadn't consumed. She slipped it into her pocket and left. What was on that paper? And why did David have the sickening feeling that whatever it was could destroy everything? The following day, Olivia was all smiles. Too many smiles. At breakfast, she even complimented Kesha's coffee. David had been in business long enough to know that sudden kindness was often a sign of a trap. By evening, his suspicion was confirmed. He found Olivia in the study with Victoria and Priscilla, whispering furiously. He couldn't hear the words from the hallway, but he caught one phrase, spoken by Olivia, that turned his blood to ice. "If he finds out what she's hiding, she's gone." David froze. His eyes moved to the closed study door. What exactly was Kesha hiding? And how much time did he have before the women used it against her? And Emma? By week 3, the war inside the Blackwood mansion had turned into a hunt. And Kesha was the prey. The 5 women had found their leverage, the charred scrap of paper from the burned letter, and now they moved with the confidence of predators who thought their victory was inevitable. It started with small rumors. Priscilla, the lawyer, accidentally let it slip to one of the kitchen staff that Kesha had a criminal past. Olivia told the driver she'd heard Kesha wasn't even her real name. And Victoria, of course, went straight for Emma. One rainy afternoon, while David was in a meeting, Victoria found Emma in the library, reading. She sat down beside her, voice dripping with false sympathy. "You know, sweetie," Victoria began, "sometimes people pretend to be nice because they want something. Maybe Kesha's just pretending to care about you." Emma frowned. "That's not true. How can you be so sure?" Victoria pressed. "Do you even know where she comes from? What she's done?" Emma didn't answer. But when David came home that evening, she was quiet, withdrawn, just like she'd been before Kesha came into their lives. That night, David checked the security footage. He saw the conversation in the library. He also saw Kesha later, sitting alone in the darkened kitchen, staring at the rain streaking down the window. Her face was unreadable, except for the way her hands trembled. Why was she letting this happen? The next morning, the women made their move. David walked into the breakfast room to find all 5 of them sitting together, perfectly poised. Olivia held a folded piece of paper, the same size as the letter scrap. "David," she began, in a voice designed to sound concerned rather than cruel, "we think you should know something about your employee." Kesha, standing by the doorway with a tray of juice glasses, froze. Olivia continued, "We found evidence. Evidence that she's been lying to you about her past." David's eyes flicked to Kesha. "What kind of evidence?" Olivia glanced at the others before handing him the paper. "We think you should read it for yourself." He unfolded it slowly. The scrap was small, the writing smudged from the fire, but the words were still visible enough to make out a sentence. Cannot return to Georgia without risking? David looked up. What is this supposed to mean? Victoria leaned forward. It means she's hiding something. Something big enough that she tried to burn the proof. Kesha's voice was steady, but there was a shadow in her eyes. That's not what you think it is. Then explain it, Olivia challenged. Kesha hesitated. I can't. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma, who had been listening from the hallway, stepped into the room. She doesn't have to explain anything. You're just being mean because you know Daddy likes her more than you. David felt a knot tighten in his chest. Emma wasn't wrong, but if Kesha refused to defend herself, what choice did he have? The women, sensing their advantage, pressed harder. David, Priscilla said smoothly, for Emma's safety, don't you think you should know who's living under your roof? Kesha met David's gaze. If you want me to leave, I will. But if I go, they win. Her words hung in the air like a dare. David wanted to demand the truth right there, but something in her eyes stopped him. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was something else entirely, something closer to fear. The women smiled to themselves, certain they'd planted the seed of doubt. But David wasn't ready to pull the trigger. Not yet. That night, unable to sleep, he poured himself a drink and walked into the dining room. The old grandfather clock stood in the corner, silent and still. He found himself staring at it again, remembering the flicker of fear in Kesha's eyes when she glanced at it weeks ago. On impulse, he opened the clock's wooden casing. Inside, tucked behind the pendulum, was a small black device, no bigger than a deck of cards. A light on its side blinked red. It wasn't part of the clock's mechanism, and it definitely didn't belong there. David's breath caught. Someone was recording them. But the question was, who? The knock on my door wasn't gentle. It was sharp, calculated, like someone wanted to announce their power before even speaking. I glanced through the peephole, half expecting Linda, but instead found a man in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase. Mr. Carter? He asked as soon as I opened the door. His voice was deep, his expression unreadable. I represent the Homeowners Association, but not in an official capacity. Something about the way he said it sent a shiver crawling up my spine. Then why are you here? I asked. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, setting his briefcase on my kitchen counter. Because you're digging into things you shouldn't. There are arrangements here in Lakeshore Estates that go back a long time. Linda Whitmore is just a small part of it. My mind raced. Arrangements? Small part? And what exactly do you mean by that? He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. You're on land worth far more than you think. But it's not just about money. There's something under this property, a resource. And certain people will do anything to control it. A resource? I thought back to the old maps I'd found in the county archives, the ones with strange markings near my property line. I had assumed they were just survey notes. And what's in it for you? I asked, crossing my arms. I'm here to give you a choice, he said. Sell quietly, take the payout and walk away, or watch them tear your life apart piece by piece. Before I could answer, there was another knock, this time frantic. The suited man froze, clearly not expecting it. I opened the door to find Anna, my neighbor, looking pale. You need to see this, she said, thrusting her phone toward me. On the screen was a video, grainy, shot from a distance, of two men in hoodies loading what looked like heavy metal cases into the back of a black SUV. The video was time-stamped from last night, and the location was the trail just behind my cabin. What's in those cases? Anna asked. The suited man shifted uncomfortably. This is exactly the kind of trouble I warned you about. I looked him dead in the eye. You know what's in them, don't you? He hesitated. They've been extracting something from the land for years. That's why they don't care about your cabin. They care about what's beneath it. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just about an HOA fine anymore. This was organized. Dangerous. Anna stepped back. I've been hearing trucks late at night, no headlights, moving down toward the old quarry road. It's not just once or twice, Carter. It's constant. The man in the suit snapped his briefcase shut. This conversation never happened, he said, heading for the door. And if you know what's good for you, you'll drop this. When the door clicked shut behind him, Anna and I just stood there in silence. What are you going to do? She asked. I didn't answer right away. My mind was already racing through possibilities. I could go to the sheriff, but what if they were involved? I could confront Linda, but she'd probably twist it into another violation notice. Instead, I decided to set a trap. That night, I positioned trail cameras along the old path to the quarry, each hidden well enough that no one would spot them in the dark. I set up motion-triggered lights, but not directly on the path, just enough to catch shadows moving. Then I waited. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, the low rumble of engines. I peeked out from the darkness of my porch. 2 trucks rolled down the trail, moving slowly, their headlights off. As they passed one of the cameras, I caught a glimpse of the driver's face. My breath caught. It wasn't just anyone. It was someone from the HOA board. And in that moment, a dozen questions exploded in my head. If they were moving something so valuable, why risk being seen? What was so important under this land that they'd threaten me, fine me, and send in strangers to intimidate me? And most of all, how much danger was I really in?